think just various things compounded that gave me the message early on that you have to be a certain way.
Guys, hey, it's Delia. If you're here just to listen to Shai and don't want to hear me ramble on this intro for the next 2 minutes, then feel free to skip it. Otherwise, hey, this is the second intro I've done, and I'm doing it on video for the first time. So if you're on Spotify in whatever countries that Spotify has the video and you can see me, then hey. And otherwise, also hey, just via audio. What? Audio? Audio. So what I wanted to say is I loved this conversation with Shai. This is another person who I just randomly met on Twitter who responded to me like desperately needing an episode. And I have just loved meeting these people. It's been so cool. Like every conversation, I think I've done 4 of them now. Every conversation is so different and amazing. I love it. But yeah, I particularly enjoyed this one, really enjoyed re-listening to it as well. And I've been thinking about something that Shai struggled with in relation to me doing these intros. So he talks a lot about growing up and having this sense of like shame or anxiety and just fear about like, what are the rules of the game? Like, what's everyone doing? And what do I need to do to fit in, or that people like me, or that I'm doing it right, or something like that. I don't want to, like, you can listen to him say it in his own words. I don't want to mischaracterize it. And now he's kind of taken a step back after like building this company and whatever. He's taking this step back, and it's like looking at life and like again, this is my interpretation of it. It's like looking at all the different games that people can play, because it's kind of like, okay, let's accumulate lots of stuff at some point beyond once you've, meeting your needs for survival. Then it's like, okay, let's accumulate more. But then it's like, why do we do that? Anyway, so that's like one game that we're all common with that's talked about a lot, like climbing ladders or whatever. But there's all kinds of games going on everywhere. And in terms of this intro, like coming back to this intro and my podcast, which is like my thing that I'm doing on my own accord, like no one's asked me to do it. It's not being done for commercial reasons or whatever. Like it's like a creative pursuit. So it's like really I can do whatever I want. Like I can have an intro, I can not have an intro, I can experiment, I can whatever. But I have been operating from a place of like, oh my God, like what's the right way to do things? Like what's the best way to do things? What are the steps? And it's almost that anxiety of like, it's so uncomfortable being in the unknown or the experimental phase. And I come from this world of like achieving and follow this and tick this off. So when I started the podcast, it was the same thing. It's like, okay, what's the definition of like a successful podcast, or what are the steps to do, or how are you supposed to do it to something? But it's like this whole anxiety around what are the rules of the game, but it's like there are no rules, or I can just make up my own rules. It's like, why do I have to be concerned with that? And I guess it's because it feels scary. It doesn't feel safe. Like it's just much easier if you're handed the instructions and it's like, this is life, follow these steps, and this is how you win, or this is how you do a good enough job, or whatever it is. But it's like when you realize that's kind of all made up and you can step away from that, I guess that a lot of people just don't want to do that, and don't want to think in that way, and that even seems scary or dangerous or something. Anyway, so that is just something I've been thinking about. But yeah, enjoy this episode. And as always, I love hearing from you guys. So yeah, find me. Follow me. You can also follow me if you enjoy this stuff. But yeah, find me basically by searching my full name on Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever thing you prefer. You can also reply to my newsletter, or you can find my newsletter and find my details or whatever through that. But I honestly love hearing feedback, any kind of feedback, even just like, I listened to this. Like, people find it awkward to be like, oh yeah, I've listened to your thing. I'm like a lurker in the background. I'm like, yay, I love that. Because yeah, numbers on the screen, it's very hard to know, to connect with like, who's actually listening to this. Anyway, hope you're all having a great day and enjoy this conversation.
Yeah, what did you do? You've had a whole day. What did you do? Am I allowed to ask questions back? I don't know the rules.
Yeah. You can do whatever you want. I did lots of random stuff, which is not interesting for anyone. What? Where?
How would you feel if that's how I answered all the questions? You're like, how did you grow up? And I'm like, that's not interesting to anyone.
I hope people know. That would actually make me feel a lot better if guests knew that they could respond like that, because in case I ask something they don't want to talk about, because then it will allow me to be more like courageous with what I ask. But I think I already am pretty courageous.
Okay, I hear that. I have a friend who, loveliest guy, and he'll ask really great questions, but he will very often, his questions will start with, you don't have to answer, but. And then you really want to answer his question. But he means it. Like, he means it as like I really don't want you to say anything that you don't feel comfortable saying.
Sometimes people say that to me when I'm like, what are you talking about? I love talking about this stuff. Like, and then it makes me feel like, should I not give you like the whole 10-minute response I would like to give?
Do you often find yourself giving answers and worrying, like, am I taking too much time? Like, how much answer does this person want?
I think that's something I have to practice on this podcast, is giving myself more time to ask the question.
What do you mean?
Because I feel rushed. So I think I feel rushed in life, so I don't give myself enough time. Or I am. I'm always like rushing around. I guess that's my personality. But because I've been working with a voice coach, and he's like, you're just like, blah, 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 blah. Like, just let yourself slow down, because it's so not enjoyable to listen to when you're not breathing and just allowing the words to come out, like consciously, versus, oh my God, I have to get this thing out. And then because I phrase my questions really strangely, because I'm clearly just trying to get them out.
Okay, so I can relate to a lot of this, like this default tendency to need to get places fast. And so how about this? Instead of trying to make sure that we cram everything into an hour, how about we take as much time as we want to ask and answer questions, and we don't get all the way through, and it's fine.
Yeah. Sounds good. That's usually how I play it.
Okay.
A lot of the episodes are like that.
Part of that means you'll know you've asked a good question if I pause for like a minute straight and I'm just like, I've never thought about this before. So it'll be good to be able to have the time to think. I like this. Let's slow this down.
Great. Okay. So for audience context, this is another edition of Delia's interviewing randoms off Twitter, part 3. So all I know about you is, oh yeah, your Twitter bio. No, so you have your Twitter bio that says whatever, something about making millions. Started making money when you were 10, since made millions, sharing lessons, and then you have your values.
Sure.
You have a link to your values, which I love. I have some of the same, I don't know if I'd call them values. Well, one of the values, integrity. And I love what you wrote about, it's like your compass, your inner compass tells you which way to go, and your inner compass, it's like always being fine-tuned as you go as well, which I think is really cool. Or the way you wrote it, much more eloquently than how I said it. But the first point, I fully believe that, and there aren't that many people who do believe it, which is, well, the way I interpret it is like the Solzhenitsyn quote that if only we could separate all the evil people from the rest of us, but there's no such thing as an evil person. Like, evil cuts through the heart of every one of us, and who am I to cut and own a piece of my heart? Okay, I butchered that, but whatever. The quote's amazing. And so it's like there's no bad people. Like, we're all doing our best. Or so your value was non-judgment and acceptance. And it's like everyone's doing their best. And I kind of see that as, because if someone says, oh, what, they're doing their best and they've just molested a child, or they've, commit some heinous crime. It's like, this can kind of sound stupid, but can also be profound depending how you think about it. But it's like, if you were that person and had been through what they'd been through and had their same DNA or whatever, you would behave in the exact same way. And the idea of that is to like remove the shame, so then we can have curiosity, and then we can heal from that place of curiosity, which again, and you say that, it's like, doesn't mean there's no consequences. Of course, there needs to be, appropriate consequences. But it's just like, I guess, yeah, it's about removing the shame and bringing it into the light.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
And then you have some other one. People can just read it. It's a really cool list.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, the other one I loved, which I didn't realize people don't understand this, that it's like there's other forms of, I don't know how you phrased it, but it's like we can know things not just from like the rational mind. There's other ways of knowing. So it's like intuition. I just thought like that made sense to everyone, but I've recently had multiple conversations with, they've all been men, but that could just be a coincidence, explaining to them about like how intuition works, or how the body, but even they'll try and understand intuition through using the rational brain, or being like, yeah, that's from experience. And it's like, there's more. Anyway, there's a whole lot more there, as we just discussed, about breathwork and psychedelics and all of that. Okay. So that's your values. And then I also read a blog post you wrote about leaving, how you ended up leaving the SaaS company you co-founded, and then this journey you're on, which again, some of the question, and like giving yourself time off work. I think you initially said you'd take minimum 2 months, which I was like, that's nothing. And then now it's like it's been like over a year. And some of the questions you asked, I loved, about like, why does it have to be defined as a break between work, like between two bits of work? Is that the right way? Like, why do we even frame things like that? And about money, it's like, why does it feel different spending money when you're not like creating more income versus when you are? And yeah, you had lots of questions on that, which are really cool. Anyway, so that's what I know about you. Otherwise, cool. I mean, sorry, before we get into how you grew up, can you give us like a 2-minute summary of what you're up to at the moment? I didn't see the date on that blog post, so I have no idea what you're up to.
Yeah, so that blog post was recent. That was maybe a month ago, 2 months ago. So exited the company April last year, April 2023. And I am now, in this like you said, rest period between jobs. No, I'm in this time where I'm not jumping into the next business venture or and it's really interesting. So like you said, I said like 2 months, and you saw that and you were like, yeah, that's nothing. And I now realize that's nothing. And I feel like now, very recently, maybe a month, like in the last few weeks, probably around the time of writing that article, maybe, is the first time that I actually would say that I let myself rest. I think I've had about a year of saying I'm resting, but feeling guilty about it, which doesn't really help you rest and recover. And I heard someone described it really nicely the other day, of like that it's very common for like a CEO sells their company and they need to spend like 6 months just in their robe and slippers. And if you resist that time, then you need 2 years in your robe and slippers. And it's like, oh yeah, that tracks. I don't feel like I've rested. I've just found other ways to stay busy that weren't work. And I didn't see myself as someone who I didn't see myself as that person who's constantly grinding, constantly working, until I got rid of the work and realized that I didn't switch off. And it's only now. So to answer your question, what am I doing? I'm now being very intentional about learning how to rest. And within that, seeing what comes up when I try and rest, and why it feels so uncomfortable, and learning from that.
Yeah, I feel like you might get there when you drop the trying and it's just like, I am resting. Because trying to rest is also not resting. Or learning how to rest is also not resting.
I agree, trying gets in the way. Trying is not resting. And at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like, there's a lot of, it's a like, you just need to rest is a similar category of advice to, stop trying so hard, stop being so anxious, be less in your head. All these things, they might be pointing to exactly the right thing, but they're not how to do it. I do think there is an element of in order to do that, there is some element of learning how to do it. You're not actually learning how to do it, you're learning what you're currently doing that's stopping it. But I do think there's an exploration learning to it.
Nice. This reminds me of when I'd had like, okay, we need to get into why you need to rest at this point. But we'll start with how you grew up. But this just reminds me of when I had like long-term relationship after long-term relationship, and I had never been single. And I was like, okay, I'm having a year of just being on my own to learn how to be on my own. But it was so like the whole year I was like, guys, I'm like, clearly I was still so obsessed with relationships because I couldn't just, had to be like such a big deal. It's like, guys, this is my 1 year being single. Like, oh, usually I'm in relationships, but no, I'm being single right now. It's like, this was still so much part of my identity. And it's like, no, that's not how you do it. But yeah, eventually you get there.
And that's a perfect example of another one of those things that like, so you might ask the question, like, how do I be single? I need to learn to be single. And it's like, you don't need to learn to be single. You just need to stop having the relationships. Like, single should be this easy thing to do. You just don't have someone else there. There's nothing that's needed to be done, except there is, because you find all the stuff that's stopping you from feeling comfortable in that place.
Yeah. Okay. So, how did you grow up? Where are you right now, by the way, before we get into how you grew up? I need geographical details.
Right now, I am in Belfast, Northern Ireland.
Oh, cool. How come?
I have been traveling a lot the last few years, or at least living in a few places, and I wanted to spend this year somewhere in the UK, and I couldn't decide where. And I was finding it quite frustrating that I didn't know where to be as well. And then I came to Belfast for a wedding last month, and I met up with a friend who I remembered grew up in Belfast, and I was telling her how I didn't know where I wanted to spend this year, and she was saying that she couldn't figure out what to do with her apartment in Belfast because she's away all year. And I was like, Belfast seems cool. This feels like the place for me to be this year. And that's why I'm in Belfast.
Amazing. Okay, so where did you...
It's exactly what I need right now. It's like, yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot.
Great. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Cambridge in England.
Nice. I lived there for a year.
That's cool.
Studying.
Okay. Which college?
Magdalen.
Nice.
Were you in...
Oldest college?
No, but it's old.
Old, okay.
I ranked them based on how old they were, and that's how I chose it.
You had a list of like most like Hogwarts to least like Hogwarts.
No. Hogwarts, that's Oxford. Cambridge said no to Harry Potter. Cambridge is too cool for that. Anyway. Were you in Cambridge, the town? Or like nearby?
Yeah, I was in Cambridge, the city.
The city. Except the cathedral's not in the city, but it's in Ely.
There is no cathedral in Cambridge. There is no cathedral in Cambridge, but cathedrals are not what makes a city.
That it is in England.
Nope.
Okay.
Ely has a cathedral. Cambridge
we'll
doesn't.
take the debate offline.
Okay.
But it is. Which is like the stupidest definition for a city for people who are from places with actual size cities. Okay, anyway.
Yeah.
So you lived in the city.
Yes, lived in the city of Cambridge. Not like right in the heart where all the colleges are, but yeah, very much in the city.
Cool. Were your parents involved at the university, or what did they do?
Yeah, so they were there because my dad did a master's there a long time ago. But he wasn't involved in the university after. Oh, he actually he did a PhD as well. This story sums up my dad nicely. He did a whole PhD. He did it in about half the time that it normally takes someone to do a PhD. It's like unheard of. He submitted it. It came back with like 2 amendments that needed making, which is again unheard of. Like you're meant to have a couple pages of things to address, right? Like 2 things that needed changing. And he was like, no, I prefer it the way it is. And he never got his PhD. He's like, I don't believe in these changes. Like, this is how I want the document to be.
In what? What was the subject?
Engineering. Curvature splines. Engineering.
Cool.
Yeah. So he did a PhD as well, but never got the PhD. And my mum worked at Anglia Ruskin, it's now called, the old Polytechnic in Cambridge, and now does work with Cambridge University.
What did it used to be called?
When I was little, it was Anglia Polytechnic University.
Got it. And do you have siblings?
I have 3 older siblings.
Boys or girls?
So I've got 2 sisters, are the oldest, and then my brother, and then me.
Uh-huh. And so what was your childhood like?
My childhood... I think the beginning of my childhood was uninteresting. Like, fine, happy, chill. I don't have any like big crazy memories from like young childhood. So either it was pretty chill or it was so traumatic that I've suppressed them all. But it was, yeah. I was intelligent. I was a very clever kid. Like, I was reading really young. I was making computer apps really young. I was that kid. And then the later stages of my childhood were also like, if you'd asked me a few years ago, it would have been like, it was all fine, it was all perfect. When I look back now, from the age of like 10 onwards, I had like a lot of anxiety, a lot of shame, a lot of like stuff going on. I just had no ability to articulate that or understand it or like, yeah. So I guess that gets more interesting.
What was the shame about?
Anything and everything. Like, somehow, by the time I was in my teens, like, even like around like age 10, 11 onwards, everything was based around like, what will people think of me? Like, everything. And actually, I was on a retreat recently, and we did this shame exercise where you break your life up into like 5-year chunks, and you explore what you had shame around, and like, yeah, it's hard to even give example. Like, just everything in my life was like, this might not be acceptable to other people. That was like the narrative through everything. If I had like, anything that was going on like in my social life with my friends, I was like, I don't know if this is okay to talk about with my family. And everything that was going on in my family, I was like, I'm trying to hide that from my friends. Like, the whole thing was just like, how do I fit in the best in this situation?
Was there a trigger for it?
I think just various things compounded that gave me the message early on that you have to be a certain way. Like, I grew up in worlds where like there was a lot of love, but there was also a lot of like, this is acceptable, this isn't acceptable, and I took that as like, I need to act as that. Like, it's not. It was. I took the message that it was like performance-based love basically was needed. Like, I need to say these things, do these things, not be too quiet, not be too nerdy, not be too any of these things. And if I get seen for the real me, then I'm not like, then no one's gonna like me. That was the.
Interesting.
Really
are your parents both English?
My mum is English. My dad grew up in Israel. he was born. We actually don't know where he was born because he was born like during the Holocaust, like at the end of the Holocaust, somewhere probably in hiding or in moving around Europe. He didn't have a birth certificate. His documents said Poland, and we think he was actually born not in Poland.
Okay. But then he grew up in Israel.
Grew up in Israel, moved to England in his 20s, late 20s.
And did he grow up with his family in Israel?
Yeah, so his parents and his brother. The first few years of his life were spent the family traveling around Europe looking for relatives. His parents had I think about 20 siblings between them, and they spent years looking for any of them, and it turned out none of them had survived.
And they were Polish.
They were Polish, yeah.
Where's your first name from?
Shai is Hebrew.
Is your mum Jewish?
Yeah.
But they've been in England for ages.
Yeah, exactly.
Since the pogroms in Russia or something.
My dad, they spent the first few years of his life, so they spent the 40s. He was born in 45. So they spent those years traveling around Europe. They definitely were in Norway for a few years. And then moved to Israel late 40s or early 50s. And then he moved to England in the 70s.
But your mum's family, I mean.
Oh, my mum's
family.
Do you know
their history?
Yeah, so her mum was English, her dad was Dutch. They escaped when the war was starting, when there were murmurings of the Nazis coming in. My mum's dad, his family got out. My granddad, my mum's dad, then I think lied about his age to join the British Army and go and liberate some camps, which is cool. So he must have been a teenager at the time. Yeah, that's what took him to England. They escaped at the beginning of the war.
And your mum's mum?
Mum's mum was English. I don't know her. I don't know how far back her Englishness goes. So she was English.
And where did your mum grow up?
In London.
North.
And then moved to Cambridge.
Where?
Yeah, northwest London. Met my dad. They went to Cambridge temporarily while he was doing his MA, and then she still says that she's in Cambridge. It's temporarily for wherever we're at now, 45 years.
Got it. So were they generally happy?
I would say I grew up in a house that had very little emotional awareness. So I think we all would have said we were happy. Looking back, my dad had a lot of anxiety, which understandable. And his parents had a lot of anxiety, but again, very understandable. But we had no ability to there was no. I didn't know what a negative emotion was until my late 20s. It was just the only script I knew was I'm fine, everything's good. So I would say I grew up in a house that seemed happy. But looking back, you kind of, without all the other ones, I don't know how happy it can be.
Huh. And did you have good friends?
I think as a young child, yes, and it was all cool. I think later on, like, yes, I had my friendship groups, but it was so, like, I had such a strong feeling of I need to be a certain way to, like, I need to act how they act, that I don't think it, like, I didn't feel, it's that thing of, like, it's like fitting in versus belonging, right? If you're not being yourself, then, like, yeah, you might, like, it looks like you have friends, but you're not really feeling connected to them because you're putting on this front. And the problem was I was good at it. I was good at putting on the front. Like, yeah.
And this just came from you figuring out this is how you have to be in the world. It wasn't like comments about your behavior or bullying or something like that.
It was. So I think part of it is there was the age gap from me to my siblings means that when I was, like, let's say 7 and learning how the world works, my brother was 14 and, like, a teenager in a school where, like, you've got to act the right way or you're going to get your head flushed down the toilet. And so I think he, like a lot of teenagers do, like, found the ways to get by in that school environment. And then where he just saw them as, like, yeah, that's some survival tactics, and then, like, that's fine, and school finishes, and now I'll just be a normal person. I think I was learning all those lessons from him as a teenager and taking them as this is how the world is. And so even with things like, one example, and there are, like, thousands of these, but I remember him telling me that when you wear a bag, like a rucksack, you need to wear it on one shoulder, not on two. Like, that's the cool way to do it, right? And I noticed a couple of years ago that I was still living on that script. And, like, feeling this shame at the thought of putting it on two. And I'm like, this is crazy. And, like, I'll look at my brother and, like, he'll wear his on two, like a lot of people do. He's grown out of that belief. He would have just, like, said it to me as a passing comment one time. And I'm just like, okay, this is how the world works. This is how you have to be. Like, the world is not a safe place, and I have to figure out exactly how to act to survive in it.
Interesting. Wow. Okay, so that's quite an age gap.
Yeah, so 7 years up to my brother, and then, like, 5 years from him up to my sister, and then 3 years from her up to the other sister. So 15 years from me, like, across youngest to oldest.
Wow. Huh. And I guess were you, like, pretty sensitive and also highly perceptive, so you could start making sense of those lessons when another 7-year-old might just, it might not bother them so much, or they might not be so affected by it.
Yeah. Looking back, very sensitive child, but that was one of the things that I learned wasn't acceptable. So yeah, looking back now, incredibly sensitive, but, like, I get, like, implicit, explicit, I don't know, like, message that I got was, like, it's not okay to cry. And so I think, yeah, that like, that level of sensitivity was also just, like, shoved away.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had that as well. Like, obviously that's definitely, like, a masculine thing of, like, you're not meant to cry. But now it's just like, oh, it's a superpower to be sensitive. Like, you have to know how to because you can connect with people on a much deeper level. Like you can feel things, but then you have to know how to protect yourself, because it's like you can't, like I can't watch a lot of movies or it will just like fuck me up for like weeks. Or like people, like it will just make me cry, like someone talking to me about something. But then so as long as you know how to like protect yourself, it's like actually really good. But yeah, definitely for ages it's like such an insult to be like, oh, you're so sensitive. It's like, just get over it. But it's like, yeah, I am sensitive because I can like feel a lot, and it's just how people are wired.
Yeah, I saw a quote recently that really hit me. That was, someone said, when they're asked, why do you cry so much? She answers, the same reason I laugh so much, because I'm paying attention.
Cool.
And like, yeah, like what a incredible gift to be able to experience everything there is to experience. Like, and that's, yeah.
Yeah, except I would like more laughter, please, universe. Okay. Okay. So, and then what was the computer stuff about?
It was something I liked doing when I was a kid. I liked playing on the computer, but I had this very keen, I was very interested in how stuff works. Like I loved watching, like behind the scenes documentaries of movies. Like I loved understanding how stuff comes to be. I would just sit and read the encyclopedia when I was little. I just wanted, like, I was just learning how the world works. Like I loved it. And so as soon as there were like, I'd be playing a computer game, and I was really interested in like, how does the computer work? And there was this book that I guess my mum had picked it up for my older siblings, and it was like a programming for kids kind of book. And I found it online. I found the exact book the other day. It's really cool to go back through it. But it had these little monster characters, and they would teach you like what to type into the computer to make computer programs. And I picked up the book and started doing it when I was 4. And I really liked making these little computer programs, and I liked that you could like make the stuff that otherwise you would just be playing it, but like this is how it came about. And then when I was 7, I did a similar thing with my mum. My mum was on a course through her work that involved, like, it was learning how to use computers. Basically, it was learning like Word and Excel, and there was also a section on making websites using HTML to make a website. And same thing, I was inquisitive, and this book was left lying around, and I picked up the book and I made a website, which I also found recently and put online, like my first website from back in the day. And then when I was about 10, and this was when like companies were just starting to get their first websites, we'd have family friends who had small businesses or whatever it was, and they wanted to make their first website, and I'd be like, I can do that for you. This 10-year-old kid who knows how to make websites, and I started making websites for people in the like, family friends, and then it spread wider and wider, and without realizing it, I had a business when I was 10 years old.
Cool. And you were charging them?
Yeah, so the first one, I charged £50.
Wow, that's punchy.
Yeah, I mean, like for them, like what a great deal. Like that was like not a lot of money for these businesses, and for me, I'm like, that's a lot of like, chocolate.
How did you come up with it?
Come up with 50 as the price.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it sounded big enough that I was like, I'm doing business. This is really exciting. And
Like, did
actually, they I'm sure I would have had discussions with my parents, with whoever, like, to figure out what to charge. But I remember I charged 50 and they paid me 100.
Nice.
They were like, you did a great job. Like, gonna give you double.
Cool. When were you born? I'm trying to imagine what era computers this is.
Right. I was born in 1991, which is pretty much when the web was invented. And so these first websites I was selling was 2001.
Got it. I can't imagine
Yeah.
what a website looked like back then, but
There was this phrase, they were referred to as like leaflet websites or flyer websites. That it's just, yeah, it was a leaflet. It was exactly what you get in a leaflet, but people wanted to put that online. Yeah. If you want to see a cool website from that time, you know the movie Space Jam?
mm-hmm.
The third best movie of all time. Its website from the mid-90s is still live as it was then, which is quite cool to see.
Cool.
But yeah, they didn't do much. There would just be a few pages and a few links, and there were no rules. Like, every website looked totally different. It was a very creative endeavor. Like, the menu would be in a different place on every site, and like nothing. There was no consistency. Like, there were no style guidelines for what a website should be at the time. It was much more creative.
So is that what you spent most of your time doing outside school?
It would go through phases. I never remember it. It was never at the expense of other things. It wasn't like I locked myself away and did this and then I didn't spend time with friends. I think my time it was all quite well rounded. Just the time that someone else might be like at home playing on the computer, that was me playing on the computer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so school. So how's your experience towards the end of school?
Similar to what we've talked about. It was yeah, I would do perfectly well academically. I would not do so well in like PE, in sport, and I was desperately trying to figure out how to fit in, how to like make friends like me, how to make girls like me. That's how I'd sum it up.
What kind of school did you go to?
It was a state school, state comprehensive. 1,000 people across 5-year groups, and then went to sixth form college after, which had 1,000 people in each year group.
Why do people do that? Is because the sixth form college is like better?
In Cambridge at the time, there were very few schools that went. It was, I don't know the historic reason, but the vast majority of schools in Cambridge stop at age 16, and then you go to a different sixth form.
Oh,
now it's more common. Like, I think that's shifted now, but at the time, I think only maybe like the private schools. Like, there were only a couple of schools. The normal thing was that school ended at 16, and then you went to a different one.
Got it. And was that the same school your brother went to?
Yeah, all my siblings went through the same schools.
But
I never overlapped with. I never overlapped with them because of the age gap.
Mm.
There would be teachers who had taught them, but yeah, we were never at school at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And when you were growing up, did you have an idea of what you would do after school? And was that influenced much by your parents?
I think if I had to make a guess at the time, I would have said that I would be doing some kind of technology business because that's what I had already been doing and I liked it. I also, though, I remember, and my parents always encouraged, like, their thing was always, they were pro education because it gives you maximum choice. My mum's thing was always like, go to university, and then if you want to go and like be a bin man, go and be a bin man. Like, awesome. But have the degree because you might need it. That was the like, in case you ever want to need it. But I remember I was always much more. Everyone saw it as a given that you follow this path, and I was always very like, I'll figure it out from first principles as I go. Like, I remember when the discussions were happening about, I think even definitely about going to university, but even about going to sixth form, I think everyone saw it as a given that I was academic, I was smart, like that I was going to go and do that. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to explore all the options. Like, I'm going to, like, that's not the only path. And so it's not the only path that I want to consider. And I did end up doing that path, but yeah, where everyone else was just kind of like, stop being silly, like, you're obviously going to do it. I'm like, no, I'm going to figure out what works best.
So what would another option have looked like?
Take a job, take an apprenticeship, travel, I don't know, like whatever the options were at the time.
Okay. And then you had the same approach for uni?
Yeah. Yeah. And uni, I had to figure out I remember really struggling with which university to go to because my first choice was the one where my brother still was living. And I remember being really unsure. Like, I think I had this sense of like, is that going to hold me back? Like, in wanting to like go to university and be my own person. I was like, if I have a family member in that city, is that going to really? And I remember grappling with that for a while.
Where was that?
Manchester.
And that's where you went?
Yeah. I eventually decided that I have to do the one that seems right for me, regardless of who is around, and make it work.
And what did you do there?
What did I study? It was like a half computing, half electronics course. So I think I figured that the computing would be familiar and I wouldn't have to work too hard at it, and the electronics would be something new that I was curious about.
Mm-hmm. And did you enjoy it?
I loved uni. My university experience was, I loved the social aspect of uni. I found myself in a lot of ways. I wasn't impressed by the course, and so I quickly figured out, like, I zoomed out. This was kind of a recurring theme in my education, was if I didn't feel like something was being taught well, I'd rather learn it myself and then just break out of the system and figure out how to, like, what do I need to do to pass this exam so that they are happy? But I'm not going to, what I saw as waste my time on doing it the way that it's been set out here. And so uni was very much that. It was like I got warning letter. I got a letter a few months in about my attendance. That it had dropped below whatever the percentage was, but the reason it had happened is because I didn't feel like I was getting anything from the lectures, so I didn't go. And then the lectures were being, like, the slides would be put on the internet afterwards that you could read them in your own time, and I was like, it's not a effective use of my time to be going, so I'm not going to go.
And so why did you think uni was worth going to at all if you knew that you were capable of learning on your own?
I thought I might end up wanting the degree, and I wanted the social experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can't believe all these people who are like on Twitter, this whole trend of like anti going to uni. I guess in the US it's different with their college and how expensive it is and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's so about the social part. I mean, that's like a huge part of it, right? And if you can afford to, it's like, when else in your life do you get to do that?
Yeah, for sure. And I did, we'll get to it as this conversation continues, but I did have a time in my life that was like being back at uni again, which was very interesting. But
in the last 12
generally,
months?
Sorry, no, a few years ago.
Okay.
Like what? Pandemic time.
Okay.
We'll get there.
Interesting. Okay, so then what was the move after uni? Wait, and sorry, did the anxiety stuff continue through that, or was it kind of like you were more free to figure stuff out?
In some ways, it was like the next step on the journey to figuring that out. But like that stuff was still there. And again, I wouldn't have described it as anxiety at the time. I'm sure a lot of, like, if I now looked at me, like me now looking at me then, I can see that there was like how much anxiety there was, how much how much of this like need to fit in was going on. So I'm sure there were some people that would have seen it at the time as well. I saw a photo of me as an 11-year-old recently, and I was like, I can see the anxiety in him. I can see that, like, those really challenging feelings. And other people, like, I don't think I might be misremembering this, but I think like my mum looked at it and she's like, "What anxiety?" Like, you can't see it, except that I know it's that, like, I can just see it in the face. It's very subtle, but it's there. So yeah, same thing through uni. Very much. Yeah, I don't think it's an uncommon pattern, right? Like, I need things around me to be a certain way, and then I can feel okay. And so how can I make things around me be a certain way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I guess during those times, everyone's trying to find their place, but it's just how, if you're like hyper conscious of it versus everyone else, like, as in the average person is probably just a bit unconscious, like moving through, so they're not experiencing that negative emotion associated with it.
Yeah, and you distract from it, and at uni it's very socially acceptable to drink your way through all that stuff. So that was definitely played a role. When I describe the drinking to American friends, they're like, "You're all alcoholic." But within that space, it was so normal.
What? That's rubbish. Americans drink. I lived in the US for 4 years. Americans drink more than any other place. At least the Americans I was around. They drink like every night of the week as professionals, plus all the rest of the stuff. I don't know if this was just like New York and where I was studying there.
It's always going to depend on the people, on the situations. No, so I'll tell you what was different with uni than with school is when you're coming at things from this place, like we said, a lot of people do. Of if people like me, if things are going well around me, then I feel good. At uni, things around me were going well, and so I felt good. Like I was, yeah. If the model is like I need to be popular for things to be okay, I was just more popular at uni, and so and so I loved the experience. Yeah.
Okay, and what was the move after uni?
I started a new business. It was like an app startup, B2C. Worked very hard on it. It didn't do well financially, but I learned a hell of a lot. And got together with like my girlfriend at the end of uni. Yeah, got together with her, and we were together for like most of my 20s. That's what after uni looked like.
Were you doing computer business stuff all through uni? Like, how did it evolve from making web pages as a 10-year-old?
I still did a little bit of that, but I didn't have a lot of time for it. I didn't prioritize it. There were maybe 1 or 2 projects that I did when I was at uni. Building websites or apps or whatever it was. And then after uni, it was one of these like, I've got this amazing idea for an app, and I'm not going to tell anyone about it because I don't want anyone to steal my idea. And pretty much it was the full, like, with what I know now, it was like the entire playbook of how to not build a successful startup. But that's how we learn.
And how long did you do that for?
That must have been for 2 or 3 years, maybe. And then I went back into. So that was a product business essentially. Like here's an app that people can buy. Then I went back into service business but with more of a like business consulting slant to it by then. But it was kind of, I would go into businesses and help them figure out how to implement technology, like what apps to build, and then potentially build it for them as well. That kind of thing.
Huh. So was it always going to be this entrepreneurial path for you? There was never a thought of like you'd get a job somewhere?
I always said that if it was the right next step, I would take a job. And this was just the way that it kept unfolding. In a way, it was. Whereas for most people, a job is the default, and then you have this like it's a big thing to be like, I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to start a business. For me, because I'd started the business when I was a kid, that was kind of the default path for me.
What was your relationship like with money at this point? Like, what did you do with the money as you started making it when you were younger?
I still had the money mindset at the time that I grew up with, which was quite Cautious with spending money. It's shifted now. Shifted a few years ago, but yeah, when I was making that money, it was still very much how can I keep my spending low, and I just saved a lot of it.
So how much had you? Huh?
Not so exciting.
How much had you saved by the time you got to uni?
That's a good question. Like nothing crazy. Definitely nothing crazy. Like 5 figures, I would assume.
Yeah, well, that's more than most people.
It's for sure, yeah, but it wasn't one of these, like, I wasn't sitting on millions from this business empire, but it was more than you'd normally have at that time, for sure.
Yeah, but you're just like a child putting money away. Like,
yeah.
I mean, yeah. For me, because I'm one of those people that it's like when you get money, you just put it straight back into the economy by spending it. So
yeah, that's me now.
Okay. And you were just like, I'll just keep accumulate, like it's safe to accumulate money or something. Like that was the programming.
Yeah. I hadn't really connected the dots of the safety, but yes, it was like there is a number in a bank account and that makes me feel safe. Yeah.
It's really interesting that you're like saying that you were hyper conscious about like fitting in or doing the right thing, but then with in terms of what you do with your life, you're like totally figuring out your own path. Because I think a lot of people are more the opposite, or I definitely was. It was like, how can I use like uni and career and everything to prove myself? Like I need to get the job to signal that I'm really smart and cool or whatever, which is obviously investment banking, which is why I think like a lot of people do jobs like that. It's like a status thing rather than like a genuine interest. So for you to just be like so focused on your path and thinking about things through first principles.
Yeah, it was, but like even as you describe it like that, it wasn't, I feel confident blazing my own path. It was this constant struggle of like, I don't think I liked people at school knowing that I had this business, for example. It was, and if I hadn't started my first business when I was 10, I'm not sure I ever would have, for the reasons you've talked about, for the reason you just described. Like, I started the business just like while I was still at the age where everything was play and everything was fun, and I felt safe to do my own thing. If I hadn't done it then, if I'd been even like 12, or if I'd been looking when I was 18 or when I was 21 or whatever, I think I would have felt much more pressure to do a more conventional path. I think the only reason that I ended up in the business world is that path snuck into my life before the point where I was making my decisions based on what people thought of me.
Got it.
Same with I remember having a lot of like, I thought playing the piano was really, I loved playing the piano, but I thought it was really uncool. I like hated the idea that my friends at school would find out that I played the piano. And now I'm like, it's the coolest skill, and I still love it. And now I'm okay owning that I love it. But same thing, if I hadn't started playing the piano when I was a kid, when I was just doing what I loved doing, I don't think I would have been brave enough to start it at that point where I was like, what will people think of me?
So do you think it was... Sorry, I'm just thinking, I've just started reteaching myself how to play the piano. I played when I was really little and I'm loving it. But it's so weird for me because it's doing something with no purpose to it. Like, I feel like everything I do is like to progress or to achieve something, or it has to be. But it's like, I've had a child prodigy concert pianist on this podcast who was like playing in front of international audiences at like 10 years old. So I'm like, fuck, well, I can never be her. Like, that ship sailed. And it's like, what's the point in doing anything if it's not to like win something? And it's like, oh, wow, because it's just so enjoyable. It's like, this is so weird. That's not obviously like partying or, you know, doing something that's like a social thing.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, that's all the stuff that I'm learning now in my rest phase. It's like, what would I do if it didn't have to have a purpose?
Great. Okay, sorry, that distracted me. So leaving uni then, was there like a bit of hubris or something? Like, what was it that made you confident to go on this path when you're sensitive about how people think of you? But was it like, oh, I'm confident, I'm so good at computers and I can like build this empire, like I'll do well on this path?
Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely had high faith that it would succeed. I think because it was coming through, like I said, uni, I felt like everything was amazing. Like, because just of the stuff that I had around me was good. People liked me, that kind of thing. So I think from that, I also had a lot of false confidence looking back at that period of time. I think I had got good enough at learning how to act confident, and it had kind of worked, so to speak. And so I was just in this confident phase of my life where I was like, yeah, anything that I do will be successful. And that was still like underlying that was still that was a very like, yeah, that wasn't an authentic confidence looking back.
Yeah, but I feel like that's kind of normal for young men especially, and it's kind of what you need before you start anything, right? Like, you kind of need to be delusional that it will work, because otherwise you wouldn't start.
Yeah, there's a different kind of confidence that's more like, I'm confident that I'll take the steps that are the best I know to take, and I'm confident that I'll be okay whether it works or not.
So were you okay when it didn't work?
I still didn't know what feelings were at the time, so there would have been there never would have been a time where I talked about that it wasn't going okay. I would have just like kept in denial for a while and being like, it's fine, I feel fine. Looking back, I remember being like constantly stressed that things like, what if someone else starts a similar idea? I was like constantly watching my back. It was not a chill time, but at the time I thought it was a chill time and that everything was going great because that's the only way I knew how to operate. And so then it eventually would have got to a point where Yeah, it would have just fizzled over time. And I would have started onto the next thing and then been like, oh yeah, I'm not interested in this thing anymore. That probably would have been the narrative that I told myself, rather than this is really difficult. This thing that I was working really hard on hasn't gone how I wanted it to. It was just like, oh no, everything's great. I'm just doing something else. I suspect would have been what I was saying at the time.
And did you stay in Manchester?
I stayed in Manchester for about a year after uni, and then moved to Cambridge for a little bit, and then across to London.
And then how did the consulting work come about?
Some of it was people who I'd met along the way. I did a placement year as part of my uni degree, and I ended up doing a lot of consulting work for that company afterwards. And then that was also the point where I realized, like, if I'm going to start doing this full time, then I need to learn how to do it in a more sustainable way. Like, when I was just doing it if I was freelancing on the side of school, like, projects came along, I did them. If they didn't come along, whatever, like, I didn't need the money. If I want to do this as a full-time thing, then I need to figure out how to get clients more reliably, that kind of thing. And that led me to a website called Double Your Freelancing, which was teaching people how to do that kind of thing, how to build a more sustainable freelance business, run by a guy called Brennan Dunn, who ended up being my co-founder on the business I exited last year. So that was kind of how the journey led to, like, the freelancing. Through the freelancing, I met Brennan, and that got me into the whole world of this whole community of people who were building small startups, essentially lifestyle businesses. The kind of, like, that was the first time that I think Brennan, or people that I met through Brennan, pointed me towards MicroConf, which is a conference for startup people, but like who are not trying to do the big venture capital take over the world kind of business. They're trying to do I want to prioritize spending time with my family, but also make some nice money from my technology business kind of thing. And that just resonated better with me. And I really enjoyed that community. Yeah.
Why were you less interested in the take over the world stuff?
Once I knew that a different path existed, just that other path just resonated more with me. I think I wouldn't have articulated it this way at the time, but I think there was very much a core part of me that saw the futility of hustle, like that saw that was starting to see that the things that we as a society place tremendous importance on, the accomplishments and status and all of those things, that those are not the things that I care the most about.
So what did you care the most about?
What's beyond that? I think this is a continuation of that 4-year-old me who was playing a computer game and wanted to know how the computer game was made. I think it was just this desire to keep going deeper and deeper rather than bigger and bigger. It wasn't like I want to get to the end of this computer game. It was I want to zoom out. Which is also to say I want to understand, I want to zoom out to the edge of the universe. Is also I want to zoom into like what's the core of me. And so I think at that point was the kind of, okay, so we do what we do in order to get all this stuff in the world. But why? Why are we doing that?
Oh my God, cool. That's what I was about to say. Did you realize like those people who want to take over the world or whatever, they're playing another game, and then it's like, okay, why are they playing that game? Or what's the point of that game? And
Yeah.
I mean, not just...
Yeah. What leads them, like, yeah, why are they doing that? It's just always that desire to go deeper. And at that point there's an article I wrote about this years ago. I'd have to pull it back out, but it was about these layers of abstraction where you just keep peeling back the world, and you, after that point, you get that, like, then you get into psychology, and then you peel back a couple more layers, and you get to like philosophy and spirituality.
And so at that point was what you wanted to like build something that's sustainable so it can support like a decent lifestyle but still have enough time to think about the world or whatever.
Yeah. And there was always a part of me all the way through that was driven by making money. But yeah, it definitely wasn't like just have the money and the status and then everything's good. There was definitely a desire to figure out beyond that.
So was it about status as well, or just more about I need money to be safe?
There's something about money and about status that appealed at the time, but they weren't primary drivers. I mean, if you want to peel it deep to what was the primary driver from all of this, it would have ultimately been the acceptance that I didn't feel like I had. But whereas some people would use status as the way to like feel that, I never, or maybe when I was doing that startup after uni, maybe there was a desire to like, take over the world with it. But yeah, once I discovered this other path of like you can make plenty of money and then like enjoy your life using some of that money. That just sat better with me.
Mm-hmm. And so where were you looking for the acceptance at this point in your 20s?
I mean, on a micro level, just wherever I went, like I wasn't showing up to those conferences at the time being like, I'm just going to be myself and really enjoy myself. It was like, how do I make sure these people like me? So on a micro level, it was just happening all the time. Was I using the businesses to feel the acceptance? I mean, maybe on some level, but I think I was just following whatever path. There might have been uncertainty along the way of like, what am I going to be doing next? But I think because of the experiences when I was younger, because I had that business when I was young, I don't think I ever had. I don't think I ever worried too much about like the business path that I went on. Just feels like it unfolded on its own. Each thing showed up. I don't think there was a conscious drive of what those things needed to be.
Are you very different now to the version that needed people to like you?
Yeah. I mean, there are still pockets of it for sure, but I'm a very different person now than I was, say, 5 years ago.
Okay, so what are the chapters that we haven't covered? So the last year you've had not working, and the startup, the transition from consulting into building the next startup. Is that it?
Well, there's parts before that as well. So the big part, so where we're up to, the key parts we haven't covered is starting Right Message, the business that I exited last year, and then my divorce, which was, I would say, the catalyst to first me figuring out negative emotions existed. Like that was the driver to like anything resembling personal growth since.
We didn't even get to your marriage.
Yeah. It didn't last that long.
What has that already happened in this?
So that was 2017 to 20. So that was 2018. 2018 to beginning of 2020.
During Right Message.
During Right Message.
With the girl you met.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, then the party chapter happened during COVID. Then,
yes, you've got the divorce chapter, the personal growth chapter, and in amongst that, there's the travel chapter. The short story is I went to, after dealing with a lot of the divorce stuff, I went to Barbados for 2 weeks on a loophole in the COVID law and stayed for on and off 4 years. That was the
fun.
Yeah.
Okay. And wait, one more question I wanted to ask about your childhood. Did religion or spirituality play a part?
Religion played a huge part. Spirituality did not.
So more like religion culturally.
Yeah, I grew up with a very cultural but also mechanical Judaism. So what I mean is like, it was, here is a rule book of a lot of rules that you must follow. And it was I never really encountered the spiritual like origins of that. It was just a list of chores that I kind of resented, and that made me feel very different than my friends. There weren't a lot of other people who had to follow these rules where I grew up, and so what's funny is now that I'd say I've become much more spiritual, there are all these things that keep happening. It's that same thing of like deriving everything from first principles, where all these things will happen and I'm like, oh, that's why the religion has that thing that I never had any meaning to ascribe to it. I've just figured it out from scratch and it makes so much sense to me. And so there are parts that I've started bringing back. I'd kind of dismissed it all for a long time. There are parts that I'm now bringing back from I'll bring things in from all different religions. If you ask me, my religion now, I wouldn't say is Jewish. I mean, it depends who's asking. Like, if you need a straight answer, that's how I was born. My beliefs are much more than can be fit into one word, but it just comes from this more built up from scratch, and it incorporates things from religions, which I now realize made so much sense at the time. Like, and then the meaning has been lost.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a whole conversation. Okay, but so were you like you had Shabbos and ate kosher and stuff like that?
Yeah. And what's funny is like it was this, we kept Shabbos, except we did TV and lights. And we, like, you know, everyone has their own level of what kosher means. So like it was quite religious, but also in that way like kind of confusing, because it's like it was this, like, as a family and over the generations we've kind of cultivated what the religion looks like in the family, but that is the one right way to be. It was that kind of and so you end up with, it was like, looking back, a lot of it felt like, and this was from religion at home and also from like just social expectations, let's say, at school. Like, all of them, the whole world to me felt like there is a rule book. There are very bad consequences if you do not follow the rule book, but it's also not going to be spelled out what the rules are. Like, there is a rule book, but you don't get to see it, but you need to act within it, which is quite a confusing world, and is the reason that I like never talked about anything with my parents, just because it's like I don't know what's allowed, what's not allowed. So best to just close off.
Where's the synagogue in Cambridge that you went to?
It's in town. It's so it's owned by the students. It's like a student and resident.
Where JSOC or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Oh, fun! I've been to the rabbi's house.
Which rabbi?
I don't know. The Cambridge one.
Okay.
For dinner. It was so nice.
Lovely.
But I never went to that other place. I feel like there was like a division amongst the people who hung out with the rabbi versus the people. I feel like that place was way more left-wing or something.
There's always politics in any of these things. It always gets political. I don't know the specifics.
Classic.
And of course it would always change as well, like, because the student community is so transient. Like, there would be a lot of people. There was lots of politics, and it was always shifting, and it was, I don't know, I stayed out of it.
Fun. I didn't realize there were families there as well with the students.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So, but was it like as you're an adult, your parents, like, do you still eat kosher?
No.
And
And
the
it was like my mom's thing was always once you're 18, you can make your own decisions. Like, you do this until you're 18. And I think she would say that she doesn't have any judgment against not doing those things as adults, and I don't know that that's entirely. I don't know that I experienced that as entirely being an embodied truth from her. But on the whole, like, yeah, it was. She always knew that she would rather, like, if the choice is that I drive to a family thing on a day where you're not supposed to drive, versus I don't go at all. Like, she'd rather I'm there. Yeah. She was no, she was okay for us to do what we wanted once we were older. But it was still confusing to grow up with. And I also, like, I found out later that my dad wasn't religious at all. He in terms of, like, the rule book, he would do it all for, like, he agreed to do it for the household for my mom. But I didn't know that growing up. There was a lot of this stuff where I just, like, and likewise, I assumed that my siblings were all on the same page that, like, this rule book is very important, and so I felt like the only one that wasn't. And actually, what was happening is they were also, like, they were much more aligned with where I was at. We just didn't talk about it. And there were a lot of things where the one that's really interesting to me is there are certain things where I've had conversations since. Like, I'm much more open with my mom now, and I've had conversations with her about it where she'll be like, I just assumed that you would break the rules behind my back, and that was kind of the pattern that was expected to continue. And what she didn't realize is that, like, I would do that, but also feel this tremendous guilt and shame about it. And I think my siblings, like my sisters, would they'd have each other through all of that. Whereas I think, again, because of the age gap, it was a bit more like I thought they were all on my parents' side and I was by myself.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think it is still, I mean, once you know, okay, these are just cultural things and whatever, it's not like you're going to hell or something if you don't follow it. Once you accept that, once you know everyone's on the same page, it's like, oh, this is a tradition. Then it's really nice to have, like, I love Judaism, how I have friends who are atheist, but they're still Jewish and they still, like, celebrate all the holidays and do all the things, and it's like a really beautiful part of their life, to the point that I describe myself as a cultural Catholic. It's because it's like I love, like, eating hot cross buns or whatever,
Right.
and being like, this is attached to something that's like part of who I am and my ancestors coming from Ireland and Italy and whatever, and but then it's like spirituality and faith is separate, and I'll make my own mind up about that. And also, like, that's deeply personal to me, and I don't believe in, like, having to, like, scream at other people like what your beliefs are. But I feel, other people challenge that, especially when I went to the US. People were like, you're not Catholic, like, you don't go to mass every week. And I was like, what? That's not what Catholic means where I'm from. But it's Judaism seems like the religion where it can be really part of your identity, and the faith can be, like, there or not there. I guess obviously depending what family you grew up in and what community you're in.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And I suspect, to varying degrees, I'm sure all the religions have those segments of them where like it is seen as incredibly not okay to not like follow all the everything, and then pockets of it where they're like, yeah, like, everyone does what they want to do, and that's awesome.
Maybe not every religion. Some of them are more you're either part of it or you're excommunicated.
Maybe, but again, would all those people agree with that? There's probably a community of the excommunicated ones who are like, yeah, I consider it my culture, and also I don't excommunicate people who, do you know what I mean? Like, it's, these things do become so personal. So
Yeah, I'm just thinking of my ex-boyfriend's sister-in-law who was Jehovah's Witness, which is very much like when you're excommunicated, it's like, it's fucked up. Like, no one in like your family can't ever speak to you again. Like, it's super intense.
Right. I feel like those end up becoming like, ex-Mormon seems to be its own religion. I've noticed. Like, you have like it's a thing. It's a thing to have grown up Mormon and then not be Mormon anymore.
Yeah, that's great. My friend was telling me recently about Mormon weddings, like because only Mormons are allowed in the temple. So only Mormons can witness the wedding. I'm like, damn, that sucks. Anyway.
Interesting.
Okay, let's save these chapters and thoughts about the universe for part 2, if you're up for it.
For sure.
Are you okay? I'll just ask you the last 3 questions that I ask people at the end.
Okay.
How do you stay grounded?
Ooh. Have you got another hour and a half?
Yeah, I was thinking like, oh my god, how long are you going to take time? No, just kidding. Only because I have to go to bed. For the audience, I'm sick of the conversation.
Yes, that could be a very big answer. What I will answer is feeling all my emotions is the best way for me to stay grounded. Anytime that I don't feel grounded, it's because there's something I'm not fully feeling and expressing.
Love that. Okay. You can also say save for part 2.
Okay.
If you don't want to answer. Now, is there a book that's had a big impact on your life?
It changes over time, which I actually think is really cool. The books will probably play a part in part 2, but the ones that stand out to me that at some point in my life I was saying was the best book ever is The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, and then Michael Singer, Surrender Experiment, and Living Untethered.
Untethered Soul.
He has Untethered Soul as well. Living Untethered is his newer one, and I actually think it's a better version of Untethered Soul. But either way, so at various points in my life, I have said that Power of Now and then Michael Singer were my favorite book. But that changes as I journey. And I have a list of all the books I've read online that we can put in the show notes.
Oh, cool. I want to see that.
There are not as many as I thought there would be, which is interesting.
How many are there?
I can't remember.
Including when you were growing up?
I've included all the ones I can remember from when I was growing up. I didn't read that much, which is why the list isn't so big. I'm going to have a quick look now. Okay, so there are currently 69 books that I have read, and there are 115 books that I want to read.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing. But then I feel like the more you read, then you get more what's the word? Like at the start, it's like, oh my God, I need to read all of these ideas. And then you become like discerning. Then it's suddenly like, no, like these people don't know what they're talking about. Like I'm just avoiding that whole. But then you find more. So it's kind of like, because there's a phase where it becomes so overwhelming. Like I don't have enough years in my life.
Yeah. And the funny thing is it is so easy to do that. And I've never for example, there are very few, if any, podcasts. I don't think I'm subscribed to any podcast. I will listen to specific episodes when someone recommends one. Apart from this one. Now, no, I'm not subscribed to it. I can if you want.
I mean,
it's that discerning thing. Like certain episodes will draw me and I will listen to it. Someone said to me the other day, over the course of a weekend, I mentioned a few TED Talks that at various points in conversation that I thought he would enjoy. And he was like, oh, you must have listened to a lot of TED Talks. And I'm like, no, I've listened to 4. It's just that 3 of them have come up in this conversation. And they've all been really good TED Talks. But if I started down the rabbit hole of listening to everything, like you just can't. And so I kind of I prioritize none of them. And then if someone I trust recommends something, or if something just draws me, then I will. Then I'll go.
What were the TED Talks?
Language shapes the way we think. Really cool TED Talk. Tim Urban, Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Can't remember. There are a couple of others.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last question. What 3 words describe the best version of Shai?
Ooh. Open. Competent. Love.
Cool. Anything else you want to add?
No, but I'm excited. I hope we do. I hope we do a part 2 because that's more interesting. To me.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Where can people find you if you want to be found?
I would recommend go to shai.io and you can join my email list and go to my Twitter, ShaiSC. Those are the 2 places where I say the things I'm thinking.
Great. Cool.
Thanks,
Shai. Jinx.